Welcome to your awakening. Please take off as your reality is adjusted.
Unmute yourself first. Good evening, folks. Welcome. Well met. Greetings, salutations, and hello to everyone in the chat room. Sorry, I was just flicking back through screens to get on target, stay on target. Right, the intro was a little bit laggy again. But it makes it more appropriate because the whole idea of the way I put the audio together on that was it was meant to sound a little bit like an old-fashioned audio tape stuttering, because of the digital interference is causing it to stutter. So the fact that there's lag causing it to stutter, it works even better. They think they're slowing us down, but by their actions, they prove us accurate in our accusations. Yeah, the internet is nearly as slow as it was back in like 98, 99, when we were still running on 56k modems and stuff like that. And now that they've filled up all the browsers with so much crap, bloatware, tracking cookies and whatever else, all the usual things that you can mention. We find the main chat page. Yeah, now the internet is nearly as slow as it was in the 90s. Unless, of course, you want to just stream a video and turn off all the bells and whistles and everything else. And yeah, of course, it is a hell of a lot better than it was. But when you're just trying to use the internet in general, it does seem to be a hell of a lot chunkier. Anyway, yes, where am I there? Looking at too many things at once again. I just wanted to quickly scroll down the chat room like I usually do, say hello to everyone. Hello, Stewie, and Form Debate. Hello. I know you're regularly doing hangouts in the chat room and stuff. If people want to join in a stream and a chat room, check out Form Debate's channel. He's regularly hosting that kind of thing on there. So if you're interested, go and have a look. Lynn Anderson, hello. And Steve Tagoose, hello. Sorry, I haven't sent you the invite yet. Yeah, there's a couple of other people I need to send invites out to, because as per usual, we got distracted chatting and then, oh, look, it's 8 o'clock. Quick, press the button. Paula B, hello. Hope you're well. Glad you got sorted back online again. And Alan McVicker, hello. Scrolling. I'm trying to scroll quick. Dave Iron, hello. And Misty Ernst, hello. And the Dot, cannabis-based life form, hello. Blazing Stars, hello. Hang on, did I miss someone out then? No, just me mistaking avatars for other avatars. Now that they're all pretty much like these little circle avatars, sometimes images can look quite similar. Barry Tagoose, hello. And I think Ben Orr, I know that's Dr. Rock, hello. I'll get Peter to forward the link to you if you want to join in, mate. You're already welcome. And Ridiculizer, hello. And Real Media Inc. UK TV, that's a bit of a long one, hello. Hope everybody's doing well, and if not, I hope you're getting better. Right now, let me get back to my main screen. I can still see the chat box on there, thank you. And click that and click that and click that. I've got a couple of bits of screen share that I'll do in a minute or two, but a couple of things I wanted to mention. I like to try and get the kind of housekeeping stuff out of the way at the start if I can, Plus, I think it's more relevant, especially like I am now. I'm referring to things from the last episode. Just a couple of points. Huxley mentioned this in the chat, and I thought it's a good way to express it. When I was talking about it, I was putting it from the point of view of young people begin with hope, and then as you get older, you become more cynical. So the hope sort of fades away a bit. As he described it, it's from idealism to pragmatism, which is, I think, a nicer way of saying it. So it sounds less like you're, blaming people for being too hopeful, too hairy-fairy, as some people like to say. And on the other end of that, if you're just outright pathologically cynical, then life can be very dark and depressing. But idealism is good in moderation, and as long as it's governed by pragmatism, strive to be a pragmatic idealist, and you should hopefully get a good balance. So I think that describes it better. And the other thing I wanted to mention is somebody posted in the chat, and I can't remember who it was now. Sorry. When I was having my little rant about people being sectioned and it only takes one GP to get you sectioned, somebody did put in the chat box that it takes 2 GPs to have you sectioned in the UK. I'm not 100% certain on that, so research it for yourself. As far as I know, it's only one GP or one MD. Has to be a medical doctor, whether they're a GP or a psychiatrist. As long as they're an MD, and then it needs the backing of just another healthcare worker. So that healthcare worker can be a nurse or a healthcare assistant or something. It doesn't have to be a GP, as far as I know or knew. I haven't checked into it further, but I wanted to mention it just in case. So, if people are adding things into the chat that point out something that's incorrect and whatever, and it's certainly very relevant and important at the moment, because a lot of the narrative that they are deliberately progressing continuously for the past few years is that of mental health, and the use of that stigma and label and stick to beat anyone that disagrees with the status quo or questions the propaganda narrative. They just wheel out something to do with mental health, and that process basically removes that person from the public discourse. Whether they're a major popularity or just some guy on the internet posting their thoughts, They just bring in a label that the only reason you're doing this is because you're mentally ill, you're a crazy tinfoil hatter, that's the only reason you're saying what you're saying. They like to be able to ignore the data, the information, or even just the reasoning within the argument that is being made, rather than approaching it from that kind of honest point of view. Or not kind of, it isn't the honest point of view. It's like good science is honest science. If the results show that your idea was wrong, then that's what the results show. But no, they like to be able to keep people within the scripted narrative. So when you start to veer outside of those prescribed lines, then mental health and the question of your own stability and sanity and stuff like that can easily be used to derail whatever you're doing. There, that brings me to why I put the subtitle the way it is tonight and talking about this kind of stuff. Again, it's a common topic that I come back to multiple times because I think it's very relevant and highly important as we go into this new age. Sorry, I just need to copy and paste, and while I'm remembering to do it before I forget again, and I can talk about the title while I'm doing this. What did I put in the subtitle? It was Harry the Hackening and the Twitter Brigade. One of the screen shares I'll do in a sec is just a little bit about that, just to show one of the news articles about each of those little points so that I can use them as a reference. I'll try sending an invite to Jeff as well, just in case. I don't know if he's online at the moment, but we will find out soon enough. And I've got to scroll down. Quick, talk, fill in the emptiness, otherwise people will go insane. From the sound of silence, a pause now and then is always a good way to amplify for effect. Yeah, right, okay, done that now. Screen share. Right, that one, we might get a bit of infinity loop for a moment. Harry and the Hackening. First of all, before I get into that, I want to mention this one. I'm only going to give this a quick mention because I think it's a kind of article that we're often talking about on a Wednesday night on the Reality Chat, on the Reality Chat channel. Click on his avatar link and go to his channel and look for the shows on there. But again, I felt this was relevant to a lot of what's going on at the moment and where they're deliberately trying to steer people towards, or how they are utilizing the script writing of the propaganda to set the scene, set the stage. This is a story on the BBC, and that's relevant in context to what's being presented in this article. They usually try and sell this kind of stuff on the health element, because, you know, you want disabled people to be able to, you know, have better lives, you know, better quality of life and all that kind of good stuff. So you should be in favor of this kind of thing, and you shouldn't really question it or naysay it, because otherwise, oh, you know, how very dare you? How very dare you? That's like, you know, disagreeing with a child at the UN because she's upset that you're not doing what she wants. Yeah, there's a fair bit in this article, but the main points I wanted to show with this is, one, it's proof of purpose and proof of concept. They can create these neural links in the brain using sensors implanted into brain tissue that then connects to an exoskeleton suit that allows this guy to walk and move about. He was, I'm not sure if he's a paraplegic, but he's unable to walk, at least. I don't know how far his disability goes, but the main point I wanted to raise in this amazing BBC propaganda manipulation NLP story, are there more sinister roles for this technology? Well, you know, if you're here listening to this show, you're probably somewhat aware of the kind of stuff they're working on towards that kind of development. But what I really wanted to point out was just the absolute admission in this guy's statement. You know, he's quite careful with what he says, but this is the professor who's in charge of the project that's developed that suit for the paralyzed guy. We are absolutely not going in the direction of these extreme and stupid applications, Professor Benabid told the BBC. So, you know, when asked, are there any more sinister roles for this technology, his attitude was, we're not going that direction. He doesn't say, no, there are not, or yes, there are. He just says, we're not going to do that. So he's basically just admitting that, yes, there are developments like that. He's well aware that this technology can be used in such a fashion. It's just that as a MD, you know, as a medical practitioner, he's interested in the medical applications, and that's it. So don't ask me anymore. I'm laughing again in the usual kind of fashion of, you know, this is somewhat gallows humor, but part of my main theme that I was hoping to point out tonight, you know, it's episode 7 of season 3. 7 is the uprising, 7 is the vector, 7 is the escalation, you know, the rising of the tide, or the fueling of the flame. They add some fuel into it and you see the flame grow and blossom. That's the number 7, I think. I'm applying my own point of view on this stuff, but you can get into the esoteric aspects to it if you want to. There's lots to dig into. But with this episode, I thought I want to just take a moment, take a step back, because I know a lot of this has been happening recently, where there's a lot of the propaganda narrative has become more about normalization than it has anything else. This is just now being announced, and this is again a point that I've raised many times in recent months. This year being 2019, the year of the Phoenix, the year when a lot of the changes will start really kicking in, and it's like a shifting gears or a switch from the last chapter to the next chapter. It's a stepping stone forward, and lots of other metaphors and adjectives. Just throw all the word salad in there. But my point being, this year has been about normalizing a lot of stuff, or just outright directly in the public admission, just saying it, as so many of us supposedly, the labeled prerogative or pejorative, I should say, pejoratively labeled dissidents or questioners that have gone, and pretty soon they're going to do this, that, and the other. And you get labelled crazy, tinfoil hatter, conspiracy theorists, whatever else, because, they'd never do that. They'd never do that. And yet, for quite a while now, they've been putting out these kind of stories where they're just admitting it. Yeah, it's happening, folks. Is DARPA developing humanoid robots that can move in uncannily similar ways to humans, which means basically that can be applied in so many areas of the current status quo. They could be military, police, they can just be workers, laborers. Are they doing that? Yeah, there you go. That's so far the tech's got so far. But this element of being able to merge the biological to the mechanical, whether it's electronic or hydraulic or whatever, mechanical, and having that one being able to control the other. And that goes both ways, even though they like to sell this idea to the general populace. So, you'll always be in control. Don't worry about it. It will be you controlling the exosuit, not the other way around. But more and more of these stories have just been plopping out there. And one that I thought was appropriate over the last week, another one of these kind of stories of, this stuff happens, folks. I know we've been telling you for years that anyone that claims this kind of stuff happens is just crazy, conspiracy theories, whatever. Does it switch to the correct screen? Yeah. But this kind of stuff is actually happening. They are now clearly, directly admitting that this stuff happens to the general populace, because the general populace has been normalized to such a degree that they'll just tut and sigh, oh yeah, typical, I thought that had happened. This story about Prince Harry is filing a legal suit against what is now the Sun and Mirror group. Originally that was the Murdoch Press, and I make that point deliberately because there is a very important connection with this phone hacking. But he's planning to sue them over claims primarily to do with phone hacking, because he was one of the victims of a phone hacking situation back in the early noughties. But the one thing that I was looking at primarily, because this is him complaining about how the press treated Meghan the Sparkle. Meghan's decision to sue the publisher of the Mail on Sunday, announced as Harry launched a deeply personal attack on the British tabloid press, was widely viewed as a significant shift in the couple's approach to privacy issues. Privacy issues. The rollout of the surveillance state via social media and people's supposed willingness to invite that surveillance state directly into their home, into their private lives. But privacy issues, do remember though, these are royals. They're different to you. They're allowed to have privacy. You're not. They are. But in that case, Meghan and Harry, who were on a 10-day tour of Southern Africa, employed the libel lawyers' shillings using private funds. I mean, yeah, I could just go on about the name of the lawyers' shillings, but yeah, that's just too easy. That's low-hanging fruit. But private funds, they've got to be sure to let you know that they use their own private funds, even though, how does this guy have private funds when all of his financial wealth comes from the people, supposedly? Unless, of course, they've been using some of that publicly given money, well, say given, it's taken from us, to then invest in private investments, and then he has his own sort of separate pot of private money that's been generated via utilization of the public money. Well, I suppose then, you could say he's got private funds, but note the fact that they have to tell the reading public. They have to make sure, you can't accuse us of spending public money. We use our private funds. We did. I saved these up in my own little piggy bank. Now, this is coming out at just about the right kind of time to Google wash, or to create a Google wash effect on the current case that is being pursued by Brian Harvey, the guy that was in E17 pop group band, now living in somewhat basic situation, considering most of his money was embezzled out of him in one way or another, and his career was trashed by the ongoing effects of the connection to him being embroiled in the original phone hacking scandal that goes back to the noughties and includes Harry and others. But now Harry's upset because the press is picking on little Miss Sparkle and, saying that she's not what she should be or something, or what is it exactly they're saying? Because whenever I see them in the press, it's just them doing photo op after photo op after photo op to feed the social media generation, because them as a royal couple have been created to fulfill that role, to be archetypes that will be followed by the social media generation who like these, feel good pictures and little snippets of quotes or, stats that seem relevant to make them feel good. So good timing to Google wash the progress that Brian had been making with presenting his case, presenting his arguments, and trying to further what started as a phone hacking case but became obvious had connections into a lot more other stuff. And you really need to go and check his own channel, listen to him for yourself. There's a lot of evidence that he's built up, and there's a lot of open doorways that show the manipulations of the establishment through the media and via industries such as the music industry, as well as their control over the judiciary. That was one other point about that article that made me curious, was if Harry's going to sue those people, he's going to take them to court. The court is in effect owned by the Queen. So is this the equivalent of him running to Granny to say, Granny, the bad people are talking shit about me again? It's just that, of course, he's got to do it through the proxy of that paper world environment, employing lawyers and feeding money into that industry itself. There's a lot of stuff like that has been coming up recently, like other people talking about how we create our own reality, but you have to go and petition your government to change reality. If you say we create our own reality with our intention, then why is it we have to go to them and petition them and fill in forms and all that? But yeah, that's a lot of the narrative that's being pushed at the moment. That might be a bit more under the general obvious layers on the surface. It's a bit more subtle, that message, but it is there that they are trying to encourage that kind of magical thinking in people. So yeah, Prince Harry, Google washing, the phone hacking case or allegations, allegedly, supposedly, all those kind of caveat words connected to Brian Harvey, and from there connected into a lot of the network of the establishment that has been utilized to control and manipulate people and to primarily keep their positions in power for those that are, supposedly in power, allegedly. Let me just switch to the other story. And why? Because in the subtitle I put Harry the Hackening, because he could have done that ages ago, but he's decided to do it now at just the right timing. Doing screen share. And this one, which came out sometime last week, and I felt is again another really relevant point, that they are now blatantly, directly letting the public know that yes, this is actually what's happening, this is the way it is operating, and they're leaving the decision there. So are you going to take part, or are you going to be one of those weird outsiders that doesn't have a Facebook account or doesn't do social media, or you're one of the excluded, one of the old paradigm, the dinosaurs, etc. But this particular article is pretty much what it says in the headline. I thought it was interesting though that the details as they originally appeared on the what's his name? Let me find his name. Gordon Macmillan, on his LinkedIn page. Originally, it included this bit here, which I have strong interest in in politics and international affairs, and am a reserve officer in the British Army, serving in the 77th Brigade. Episode 7, number 7, the 77th Brigade, which specializes in non-lethal engagement. In other words, psychological operations. And the Independent's website is a bit, they don't like the fact that I haven't clicked through their accept cookies and whatever. So it's not allowing me to do any highlighting on the page. Otherwise I would point a few things out. But the main thing, the 77th Brigade is about fighting in the information age, which is why it says supposedly non-lethal, because you're dealing with movement of information rather than use of weapons as people generally comprehend them. But the 77 Brigade's website lists planning information activity, conducting adversary analysis, as well as engaging with audiences in order to influence perceptions and creating products that aim to influence behaviors. So they're trying to influence your behavior, influence your perception, treat you as an adversary and analyze your activity, your personality, your everything. And then they're planning how to deal with that and do all that kind of stuff. So, and Brigade 77 has been around since at least January 2015. Although, of course, the psychological operations section of the military has been around for a very long time. But the main reason I wanted to point this out is just the fact that, again, they're making it obvious. They are putting it in front of people and leaving it as at that decision point, at that ultimatum of you're either with us or you're against us. This is the way it is. Your social media is influenced by somebody directly from Brigade 77. He says he volunteers, but that, do you really volunteer for that kind of activity? I'm sure, many people could argue, we do just volunteer, I think really in reality, it's a bit like, have you retired from GCHQ? Have you retired from MI5 or MI6? No, you can never retire. You will never be off their radar. You will never be truly separate and, over and done with, and you're gone and you're enjoying your retirement kind of thing. And you will always be included, even if it's just that they're keeping an eye on you to make sure that you're not letting out any secrets or doing anything that they don't like, blah, blah, blah. So you don't really just volunteer. Yeah. But they are clearly, and supposedly this was originally discovered by Middle East Eye. In other words, it was brought to public attention because it was just something that he himself had written on his LinkedIn page. But here it is in the Independent, and the article has been around the web and on all the various news media sites and whatever. So, as I say, they are putting it in your face, admitting it directly. And for the many people that would question things like when you bring up the historical evidence of things like Operation Mockingbird, and they go, oh, that was in the past, that's historical, they don't do that anymore, there's checks and balances, and oh, no, we're not as uncivilized as that now, we've advanced, we're technological now, so that must mean we're clever. Yeah. Now we don't need to hit things with a hammer. We just get the robot to hit things with a hammer. Oh, yeah, we're clever, we are. So, yeah, the evidence is there. And there's yet again another data point to show that they will admit it. They are letting the public know that this is the way it will be. All of your social media is not only surveilled because supposedly you are an adversary, because you yourself are not within the government, or even the people within the government are considered adversaries as well, because you never know, an insider might cause some terrible damage. There might be a whistleblower, or as happened in France with the police strike. The day after the police strike, supposedly a policeman went crazy and stabbed up several of his fellow officers. So they've got to keep an eye on the people who even work within their own structure. So everybody's an adversary. So you all have to be monitored and tracked and traced, just in case you're doing something that could endanger the survival of the status quo or the continuation of the status quo. But here they're clearly admitting that they not only are just watching you in case you pull out a gun. No, now they're watching to influence your perception and your behavior. So they're pre-planning where they want you to be. That's the equivalent of the guy sat behind the exoskeleton suit saying, when you read this signal, do this movement. But they've got people in place, a Brigade 77 volunteer working as an editor-in-chief in Twitter, so his influence can influence what is going on across the Twitter sphere. And now Twitter sphere is absolutely an army. It is a psychological army of social manipulation. Yeah. That was the main thing that I sort of got in the subtitle. And those were the stories that I wanted to show, was sort of like reference points, data points of like, look, you can see it, all these claims of like, oh, you're just making up conspiracies, mate. It's like, no, if you bother to put in the effort and look, you will find the data points that include evidence, paper trail, etc., that show the arc of the script. So if you can read the previous chapters and you've read similar scripts that follow the same kind of progress of development, then you can fairly accurately predict what's going to happen in the later chapters of the story. As an interesting side note, a recent re-emergence of a supposed independent media platform, Iconic. Iconic, or is it Iconic? Iconic. But Mr. Icky has decided to, I think it's his sons that have started it off, But of course, he's obviously putting his backing into it as well. But it's very, very similar to the People's Voice. And they're asking something like £100 for a year's subscription, which basically gets you the equivalent of a channel that will present to you various documentaries or presentations, lectures, whatever they think or the audience says they want to look at. So it's like, so in other words, mate, you're doing another YouTube channel where you're going to put content on that channel, but you're going to charge people £100 a year to have access to look at it. Right, you got enough money already, right? Yeah, I thought it was interesting that that's starting again now at the same time as a lot of this other stuff. But to go from those points that were just mainly those 2 points, but you can sort of include the story about the paralyzed guy and the exoskeleton suit. But those 2 main points, just about how now a lot of the general media is not so much about trying to spin everything. A lot of the stories are admissions, and they're just sort of planting the foundations there. They're waiting for the latest generation to just swallow them up and keep moving, to integrate them into their lives. So that can then lead us to things such as the Extinction Rebellion, which has been happening over this weekend. I've looked at some of the news reports, the usual kind of stuff of protesters chained to fence posts and vehicles, and just trying to create disruption to make their point, make their protest point. But a lot of the manipulation and propaganda has been deliberately steering people towards putting their energy into causes that are either based completely on false information or are manipulations of a certain amount of cherry-picked information, but the outcome of the movement itself will help reshape society as a whole. So I made point of mentioning about how, in that guy's little description on the Twitter article, he makes a point of saying non-lethal engagement. But at what point do you judge the culpability for lethal action? Because by manipulating people in certain ways, you can get people to do really crazy stuff. And part of what sort of had me thinking about this over the week was from our discussion last week, and Gary mentioned about Jonestown, and they only needed to influence Jim Jones himself, and that then had that kind of ripple out effect from him to infect his congregation, his little cult of people. Now, in a much bigger scale fashion, the Extinction Rebellion is doing the same thing, because we're now seeing the kind of effects of children under the age of puberty. So you're talking like 7, 8, 10, young children being traumatized by the concepts that are being enforced upon them, because it's not only being repeatedly presented to them via the general media, so it's on the TV, it's on the news, it's on the internet, but it's also that is being reinforced within their own education places as well. There's schools or whatever they are at, probably even kindergarten, but I'm speculating. But it wouldn't surprise me if some kindergarten teachers doing something to sort of get the kids into that kind of green agenda thinking. Isn't that a lethal result? Because potentially, if they keep pushing through with some of their demands, the results of what is changed within the structure of society could potentially lead to the detriment or even the mortal ending of large groups of people across the planet. It can just as easily be argued that is already happening. I'm thinking from their side of the argument that it is already happening because of anthropogenic climate change. People are dying, people are suffering because of it. But what I'm trying to point out here is their claims of non-lethal engagement via groups such as Brigade 77 and J-Trig, GCHQ, manipulating people's perceptions and behaviors to steer them towards actually agreeing with, backing and pushing forward campaigns such as Extinction Rebellion that will result in alterations to your society such that possibly, potentially, the lives of the people that are here now are going to be radically altered to their detriment, if not actively snuffed out, because they are considered dead wood, a carbon deficit. You know, at what point will you being a carbon deficit equate to you being turned into Soylent Green to save the planet? You know, and it gets very much like the old movie Logan's Run, where you have to kill yourself at the age of 30, that kind of thing. These are, I'm mentioning extremes, but you're following the course of logic to see where it could end up at. You know, if you continue making the same equation or reusing the same equation, then eventually you're going to get to X. Extinction Rebellion. Another element I want to throw in on this, and I'll try and get through it quickly because I know I'm rattling on again. The latest movie release that a lot of people have been waiting for, it's been hyped a lot deliberately. And as the story arc, the superhero story arc has started to decay, and the euphoria of the exuberance, the over-the-top archetypal exuberance of those movies that all fed into that, 20 plus movies in the Marvel arc of telling this story. It's probably quite a few more than that now. It's probably up to about 25, 26, 27. Maybe there's a 27 club connection there. But the latest movie, Joker, there's so many elements to this. I'm not going to dig deeply into it. And I'm looking forward to, I know there's a lot of people out there on the internet who do this kind of thing where they'll, dig into movies and the symbology and the manipulations in the script and stuff like that. But just a few things that I wanted to point out about it that had me thinking that this, again, is, I think, not a coincidence that it's timed to come out now. There's the initial element of, this is almost like what would be described as the petit mort, the little death. It's a French phrase, petit mort. It's a French phrase supposedly originally, but it's meant to describe that the coming down sensation. Originally, it was supposedly meant to imply that period just after you've had sex, just after coitus, as you're catching your breath and your body's relaxing again, and you get almost like, it's like a slowly burning disappointment that, it's over. The orgasm has finished, and now I'm back to just normal, just everyday existence. And in a metaphorical sense, I felt very much that this movie, after that upsurge of the superheroes fixing the world, saving the universe, getting the bad guy, way, and then there's this story about this crazy guy who's one of the most key influential figures in DC history, in Detective Comics history, but also in the kind of like superhero genre history. He is one of the most iconic figures ever. And he's one of the first, maybe not the first, but certainly in mass media print at the beginnings of the comic age. He was one of the first classically cliched enemy figures, the bad guy. He's such a bad guy. He's a joker. He's meant to be just a psychotic, crazy fool who laughs as he's doing crazy stuff. But there's a lot more archetypal elements to that character, and the influence that it has on the psyche and within the discourse of the process of self-realization. I know that sounds a lot. Well, that's a lot to attribute to something supposedly so simplistic as a bad guy from a comic book. But you've got to remember that our psychology changes as our society changes and as our culture influences us and we feed back into that culture. There is a feedback loop that happens, and at the same time you have these think tanks and influence groups that deliberately feed things into that process to try and influence the public en masse. Hence the whole concept of the superhero storylines being used as archetypes to manipulate the public en masse and steer them in certain directions or give them certain ideas, mold their behavior, influence their behavior, Brigade 77 et al., etc. So that element to the movie in the first place. And even more so when you look at the movie as it is, the way the script is, the way it's presented, it is not a superhero movie. In no way at all is it a superhero movie. There is nothing in it that is like any of the other superhero stories that have been pumped out for the last few years. There's no superpowers, there's no flying through the sky, there's no throwing cars around, there's no laser beams from the eyeball, nothing, no superpowers, nothing. Really, what it comes down to is it is the story, very similar to the story in the movie American Psycho, but it is a story of the descent of somebody into psychopathy in the environment, or enabled and fueled by the environment that he's living in. And I don't want to throw out a load of spoilers because I want people to see it from their own point of view and think for themselves, decide for themselves. But just a general observation of the way the script plays out and as the movie plays out, it's more like watching a horror movie, like a horror thriller movie. It's not a superhero movie. And absolutely, it is meant to make you feel sorry for the main character. They are deliberately normalizing the psychopathy that is meant to be represented by that character. At the same time, they are feeding a lot of current propaganda narratives. One in particular is that destruction of the system and the attack of the rich, the poor versus the rich, the class warfare, which is an old trope, and it's an old theme that they constantly reinforce. But within the movie, you are meant to develop sympathy for the character because of the terrible things that happened to him in his life, and how, the way it's portrayed is just that he struggled to cope and his own psychopathy takes over and he ends up becoming the character that is referred to as the Joker. So the main point there is that he is a product of the society he is living in. So what they're saying in general, as the story as a general sort of picture of what they're presenting to the public, they're saying to the public that, well, if your society's really shit and corrupted and nasty and people are doing all this kind of nasty shit to it, what do you end up with? You end up with psychopaths like the Joker. And who does he target and where does he go to do what he does to deal with what he thinks is the problem? He attacks rich people and he attributes all blame to that class-based, financial-based structure. Obfuscates completely the influence of that very same structure over the development of that character into the psychopath that he becomes, because it's that very same structure that governs the society that create that character, supposedly give birth to that character. All of this at the same time as they're offering to people this opportunity via a movement called Extinction Rebellion, where they can go out there and give it to the man. You want to cause some disruption and smash up some shit and show how pissed off you are, the fact that you're now unemployed because a robot has taken your job. And because you're unemployed, you've lost your home. And because you've got no work and nowhere to live, you can't claim any help from the system. You can't get any benefits. You can't get any prescriptions, no medical help. No. Nothing to do with that, folks. Here you go. It's a movement where you can join in to change the way society is structured. I think that, like I say, I didn't want to dig too deep into it. There was a lot in the movie that I think is very subtle archetypal manipulations. Rather than like a lot of the superhero movies are, they're saturated with symbolism primarily because symbols for the symbol-minded, you know, they are injecting little snippets of data or concepts at people with every symbol they present to them. This is much more like a 2-hour expedition into the misery that society can become or can be for some people, depending on where you are, where you happen to be born and live and, you know, try to survive. But it's used very much as an excuse. You know, those kind of elements of society have been there basically all along and can be found at any part of the world. It's not attributable to any one location or country or tribal or ethnic grouping or anything like that. But it's presented in such a way of like, oh, because their society has become so terrible, it causes the birth of this crazy character who rises to notoriety and power and whatever else because he's so crazy. It's extremely nihilistic. You know, as a most simple short description is it is extremely nihilistic, which again, this is my main point again, it aligns perfectly with a lot of the narrative in the propaganda that they're promoting at the moment, that unless you change society, there is nothing in the future. All you children are going to be dead in 11 years, so you better start getting out in the street and smashing shit up, because otherwise you'll all be dead. It's really putting a very dark element into people's thinking. And I know, you know, usual kind of caveats, it's a movie and it's meant to be a horror movie about one of the bad guys. But when you add it in context to everything else that's going on, I don't think it's any coincidence that it's out at the moment and it's written and filmed the way it is. One little side note extra. They made a lot of people in the media have made a big thing about jacking or whacking, how do you pronounce it? Jacking or whacking Phoenix. You know, and how he either they loved him or they hate him. They either thought he was really good at playing the Joker or that he was doing a terrible job and Ledger, you know, Heath Ledger was better and blah, blah, blah. But whacking Phoenix, playing the Joker, and the Joker is the spark that begins the fire of destruction in Gotham, and from that fire, Batman is born. You know, like I said, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but you watch the movie, whacking Phoenix. Phoenix rises from the flames. Phoenix has to be born from the flames. You have to put the Phoenix in the flames to get the new Phoenix out of the flames. And all of this at this time. Yeah. No coincidence, I would argue. I do argue. I am arguing. Let me just check my notes, see if I left anything out. Sorry if I missed things in the chat, I'll scroll back in a sec, because you know what I'm like. Once I get onto a roll, I need to continue and say it before I get distracted. One other element here, thanks again to that guy, Scott Webb. He's often covering the news media articles, and he raised this one about the control system being able to turn on the camera on your phone. Yeah, I thought, again, connected phone hacking. Well, you know, you think phone hacking's bad, folks. Do you realize that they can just monitor everything you're doing now? So go back 20 years. If you said that to somebody 20 years ago, they would have said, like, oh, you're talking about phone hacking. That needs special technical ability and equipment, and you have to get bits of paper from the judiciary to allow them to cut into your phone lines and all. No, now it's just That's what the technology does. Yeah, your technology allows them to do that. So if you've got one of those devices, be aware that, yeah, they can not only hack it to look at your messages, they can turn it on and off, they can turn the camera on and off, they can turn the microphone on and off, etc., etc. Yeah. And I just wanted to mention this because if it plays out as it often has done in the past, then pretty soon we're going to see some kind of false flag accused or directed at Syria, because the US are moving their troops out of northern Syria on the border with Turkey, because Turkey is planning an invasion, and Turkey has claimed areas of that land for a long time. And basically the Americans are supposedly abandoning the Kurd forces there that they've been supporting for a long time. I think there's more going on with that situation, but the point is, keep your eyes open and see if the standard narrative, the standard script, the standard methodology gets played out again. Now that the US troops are supposedly being pulled out, usually what happens is there's some kind of accusation of an attack, that like Syria has used gas or something like that against their people. A false flag is carried out, and then, oh, lo and behold, the American forces have to go back in because look what just happened. But yeah, see what happens in the media over the coming week or so. Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix and the Joker army, a psycho baby of a deranged society. But, yeah, I'll leave it at that, because otherwise I'll end up ranting for ages about that kind of stuff.
Good. I was just reading his wiki page. He was involved in that film, What the Health? Yeah?
Who? Joaquin?
Joaquin, Boaz and Joaquin Phoenix.
Oh, right.
Yeah. He executive produced the documentary What the Health. Apparently he's been involved in a lot of animal rights because he's a vegan. But he's also been involved in peace activism, and he was a Bernie Sanders supporter.
Was it him as well that starred in a movie a while ago called Her, about a guy who falls in love with a virtual girlfriend online? I've got a feeling it was him. I can vaguely remember some of the bits from it, and I'm sure it's him. So it just made me curious, looking at the history of his movies that he's been involved in.
Well, it's psychological warfare, isn't it? The battle. And the Joker card, I was going to say. They always play the Joker card. As that movie is out now as well. But the universe always throws you the Joker cards, and you just got to be very, wary of those.
It also says that he's the American Democrat type of activist, and they're taking that now more and more with the Extinction Rebellion, yeah? To be any kind of a rebel means, being crazy, basically.
Well, and the help of Brigade 77 on the case, they're reinforcing that, aren't they?
Yeah, and with the help of the modern campaign for mental health awareness, everybody's mental. Talk about Minority Report. Some people have recently been mentioning that. They have in effect already carried that out, because by the Mental Health Act, they've just got to label you mental, and then whatever you're saying can be treated as if like Minority Report. So, look, he's acting a bit crazy, therefore he might go out and do something destructive. That's like Minority Report pre-crime. By, say, for example, typical, sort of foundational point, you talk about 9/11, and somebody goes, oh, you're a crazy tinfoil hatter. So that means you're automatically being on that list of pre-crime, because if you're one of those crazy nutters talking about 9/11, then according to the agencies, that means you're more inclined to do something dangerous. Do you see what I mean? By putting you on that kind of label list, they're already including you into what is a pre-crime infrastructure. Yeah,
Don't,
people
don't,
have been picked up pre going to attend protests. So that, again, that is pre-crime. It's not something that might happen in the future. It's something that's happening now. So
yeah, no presumption of innocence. If you was just worrying about Joachim, don't worry about him, because, like, as well as his animal rights activism, which a lot of people say is a part of the 2030 agenda, the veganism. But what the health? I thought that was a really good documentary. That got me giving up all processed meats. Yeah, all basically all crap meats. Yeah, give them up after watching that. It was horrible. But he's also a member of something called the Peace Alliance, which I've just read is strongly influencing the Safe Schools Improvement Act. Yeah, so not so sure. I mean, a lot of these active groups, the bigger organised ones, they're a part of an agenda at some point or another.
Yeah? Oh yeah, trying to. I mean, changing us and not the climate is the idea.
Yeah, it's spot on, and it's like the climate of mankind. That's what they're trying to change, not the actual climate of the planet. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good, interesting quote that Days put in the chat before. He was in the chat before. I think he's had to go, but he popped in to say hi, and I just wrote this down because I've lost it in the chat. It says, he put fake mental health concern tied into the fake news agenda in a post-truth age. I'm hearing that a lot, the post-truth age.
I think I might have found it. Let me just... Yeah. The first bit's the Judeo-Krishnamurti quote.
Yeah, he does a little quote there, yeah. It's
fake mental health concern tied in with the fake news agenda in a post-truth age, yeah.
Yeah.
Layering it on, one on top of the other. And if, again, I know I've banged on a lot about this past however many months, but a lot of the propaganda narratives that they've been pushing for a number of years are now starting to coincide. They're starting to come to culmination. So we have things like an icon speaking at the UN about how their disability is a superpower, riding on the back of the popularity of superheroes at the moment in cultural media, generally in culture, certainly Western culture. All of that is the deification of mental or what used to be called mental illness.
And anything spontaneous or real just gets assimilated straight away, because I noticed one of the links of the BBC story about Extinction Rebellion, 270 people, even the farmers are joining them now, which, hang on a second, wasn't it last weekend that the Dutch farmers were actually demonstrating against the climate change differences because they're going to be hit hardest? Now they've got farmers marching with Extinction Rebellion, and they've got a picture of a farmer there, with a bull on one side, and on the front of his tractor is the Extinction Rebellion system, logo. So they take stuff and they just assimilate it straight away.
If you want to traumatize the kids, I mean, what I saw today at that event in London was a hearse pull up with a coffin in it, and it's that traumatization, that fear, and kids are thinking at 6 and 7. I remember my daughter when she's that age, and they do ask silly, they get fearful for some reason. It's something that they ask or get concerned about, the end of the world or something. They've seen something or whatever, and all this is doing to those kids of this generation, these younger ones, is causing them to be really traumatized. It's actually abuse. They're abusing them because they're not actually giving them the correct information. As you said, it's skewed information, and it's not correct at all, and that's actually abuse. Then it's misusing energy. You're abusing it. So that's what they're doing. And the parents, and I feel sorry for the parents. They have to cope with this. They've been, they've got the little kids who are,
very like 1984. It's very Orwellian in that way that it is putting a schism between children and parents. Because you imagine the parents trying to explain to the child, it's like, look, we have to drive to school because I have to make sure you get there safely. And the kid go, no, mummy, you're destroying the planet every time we go in the car. And so how do you get past that point of the child thinks they're going to die because you drive the car, but at the same time you need to take them in the car so that they get there safe and sound, etc. The trauma level that is being initiated, and it's putting a massive wedge between the children and the parents, because the children will just start accusing their parents, just like in 1984 when the kid dubs in his parents and gets his dad done over in the fucking torture room.
That's an interesting. So can I go on this one? I saw an interesting aspect. We mentioned it just before the hangout about the pagan nature of having these death marches, but that also ties into the fact that within the last 30 years, people have done more and more to hide death. To hide it, because 40, 50 years ago, you used to have hearses going down the street really slow. You'd see a funeral once a week, and people would stop, take their hat off. But now they've got all these, people in big costumes doing death marches down the road. And just making the kids think, oh my God, death's here. This is it. We're in the age of death. It's a death cult.
The denial of death. It's part of the death cult.
Manipulation. It's a reaction against hiding death under the carpet for 40 years. Where's grandma? Oh, we've got to go and visit grandma this week, but we're not going to really visit her because she's died. And we're going to, no, you can't come to the funeral. You're too young. You've been protecting kids against death for a long time. And now they're putting it right back in their face again.
But as a boogeyman, not just as part of your life experience. Death is a reality. Yeah,
because that's part of the social media. Once you're on social, you can never die if you're on Facebook. Do you know that? If you're actually looking at your Facebook page, you can never die. You'll be there forever looking at your Facebook page.
Well, they've even created that, haven't they? We mentioned it in a story ages ago. They've created a specific area of Facebook for people who've passed away, and they still keep the profile up to date and all that.
And I know I mentioned it before. I can't remember the proper name of it, but there was an ongoing PhD project. I can't remember her name. Student that was designing it, but after experiencing the death of one of her friends, and she felt so lost, they wanted to be able to recreate the sense that friend was still alive. So she started developing an AI system that takes all of that person's social media, so in other words all their Facebook posts and content, and through an algorithm makes it live online again. So you can go on their Facebook page and have a chat with them, and they'll say things that are based on what they've said before. So the algorithm interprets or recreates that character through interpretation. So are they dead?
Leave me alone. I want to be dead in peace. Stop dragging me back into this machine.
I just want to mention, before forgetting, the chat moves past it as well. Super Lead, and he did post in, it does take two. I guess you were referring to what I was saying about the GPs and people being sectioned. So I just wanted to add that in. A couple of people are saying, Stewie said the same, I thought it was two. So there's more confirmation for it takes two to get somebody sectioned. I want to be clear on that, just because, like I was saying at the beginning, I think it's very, very relevant at the moment, because it's one of the methods that the system will use to derail people or to take them out to the public sphere, like they've tried to do with Brian Harvey. They've done it repeatedly. They've tried to accuse him of being mentally unstable so that they can get him sectioned, so that they can shut him up, basically.
Yeah, and they've been running the fake mental health thing, like we said before, Dave's mentioned, for a while now. Theresa May, when she was Prime Minister, that's when it all sort of was given a big, government sort of push a year or two ago now. And it's been, ever since, it's been right throughout all the mainstream, BBC especially, been pushing this. And, it's like I say, it's this fake, tied into the fake news agenda and all the rest of it. They're not really concerned about your health. They just want you to say you are and go along and even go along with. There's people who think, well, I'll get benefits for this, won't I, if I just go along with this and play the system, whatever. But then you're under that umbrella of then they have to administer all control and everything because you can't do it for yourself. And it seems that figure, in the crazy world we live in, mental health, mental issues are just getting more and more and more, larger, in the population. So it's not slowing down, it seems.
No, it's escalating.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, when I was a child, the autism rate was something like 1 in 10,000. Now it's like 1 in 40 something.
Yeah.
I know, this should be. I think I'm going to have to do just a standalone video, putting out some of the standard caveats that I end up repeating again and again and again. Because it's like, I know if people come to look at these videos and they haven't listened to any of the stuff before, they might not have heard me say other stuff, but just as a caveat, because we're talking about this kind of stuff to do with autism and mental health issues, that isn't like I'm saying that autism, people who've got autism are bullshitting or making it up, or that it's all, just whatever, just fake or something, some kind of manipulation. I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not saying that you are somehow disabled. I don't view disability in the same way as a lot of people do, and I'm not afraid of using the word disabled. If somebody's in a wheelchair, they're disabled because they haven't got used to their legs or whatever, so they're not doing the same as other people. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're any less than anyone else. It doesn't mean you're worth less than anyone else. Not as far as I'm concerned. Within the system that bases things on materialism and productivity, they rate you as less than. This is part of the problem, and it's part of what has enabled a lot of their manipulation. This is why I wanted to mention the caveat. Somebody like Greta Thunberg is now acting as an icon to suggest to all the young people out there that if you want to be a superhero, you've got to have a disability. You've got to have something that used to be called a problem, an illness, a disability. Now, you want to be special, you've got to have a superpower. What's your superpower? Oh, I've got Asperger's, or I've got this, or I've got that. Just pick a label. Because for the children looking at the general media that they're surrounded by, it's good to be a superhero, isn't it? Everybody wants to be a superhero. It's great way. So you then tell them, well, if you've got one of these disabilities, that's actually a superpower. The child's going to be thinking, well, I want that disability then, because then I'm a superhero. And at what point do people correlate that kind of propaganda in the media with the rising rate of those kind of problems in the medical health sector, in the pharmaceutical connection, etc.? They are deliberately trying to create generations of people that are basically mentally retarded compared to what was a normal standard of however many years ago.
Well, kids can get those powers for themselves, All you've got to do is drink 3 energy drinks before you go to school every day, And then when you get diagnosed with ADHD and you get put on Ritalin or something even worse, a couple of years of that, don't worry, you'll be as autistic as Greta. So I think that's what it is, A lot of the kids that are getting, they ask too many questions, ADHD. And that's it. They're put on drugs. The numbers in America are fucking horrendous. Oh man, all those kids. I mean, I see me. I was just like that at school. Asked too many questions, spoke out in class. They would have me on the fucking Ritalin. Jesus Christ.
It's dulling down. You see, it's a new generation coming through that are questioning everything, and they're medicating them. So there's, like I say, they're messing up their other parts of them. Their sexual parts or whatever. When they get older, they're putting hormone blockers in there. They're doing all sorts to the kids, or trying to mess up this next generation, or psychologically mess them up as much as possible, I think. So when they become adults, then they're easily more manipulated again, because because they're helpless, especially if they've gone through something where they didn't know all this gender stuff we talk about and all this the Tavistock involvement, you know, and all that social engineering for the children going forward. That's because that's what it is, you know, and you know, that's what they're doing, and they're just performing the next steps, you know, and we're just living through them. Yeah, what's that saying?
I'm thinking of developing selective mutism. If it's good enough for the kids, it's good enough for me. Well, I posted a bit of silliness however many days ago. I think it was under one of Jeff C's videos, and I put it along the lines of, I've got OCD, which is offensive communication disorder, because when I try to talk to people, I tend to, you know, they tend to get a bit offended because of the stuff I say to them. And I've got Asperger's. Yeah, occasionally my ass, you know, happens to burp out stuff randomly and I can't control it. So Asperger's, and I also suffer from selective deafness. So if you're talking shit, I just don't listen. Yeah. That's an age-old useful trait, you know. The kids might have selective mutism, but us old folks have got selective deafness.
Yeah. And it's a shame because the adults are there. We're there to you know, to nurture the kids, to bring them up, to show them the right way. And most people I know who know about these sorts of agendas that are going on and see it in the media, you know, they see these things being pushed out there. They're all like, you know, it's crazy. Everyone thinks it's crazy, but they're still using it. They're still pushing it out there. And like we mentioned with the telemedical thing you can do now via Skype. We mentioned this a few weeks back, where you can just ring up now, and it's aimed at children, not adults. It's aimed at kids. They can ring up and get a telemedical appointment to then go for a gender swap or whatever it is. They now offer them all kinds of stuff which they can then, you know, partake in. And this is, you know, I don't know. It's just this is the way it's been going for quite a while now. Schools are teaching all kinds of stuff that, you know, the parents, some have spoken out, most have actually, and you don't hear about it. You know, they don't want to sort of know. They'll promote the one in Birmingham with the Muslim families because there's an agenda there. You see a political agenda to have, but anybody else speaking out across the country about these sorts of things being pushed in school, you know, when little Johnny comes home and he says, "What you've been learning in school today, son?" And, you know, he says, "Well, you know," and you think, what? You know, parents are, you know, going to go up there or say that's not good, you know, and this is the ages of infants, you know, and juniors, not, you know, and it's been pushed out there more and more and more. It's been mentioned a lot in other, you know, internet sites and stuff and news and that, but it's not getting enough attention. It's just the media will hype it and use it for political purposes and stuff like that, and then use it for extremities to you know, to present you the, as we mentioned, lots of things, polarized extremes of things. You know, this is the extremities. These are the documentaries of all these kids who are fucked up, you know, and all that sort of stuff. So it all, you know, plays into the, you know, the acceptance, normalization, and all the rest of it that we talk about.
Yeah. You know? And the MK Ultra element of trauma-based mind control or trauma-based mind manipulation, maybe a more accurate way to describe it, because control is not always guaranteed. But the point is, what they're mainly after is to shatter the self of, or the personality of the target, so that they're left in confusion, destabilized, potentiality to schizophrenic episodes, things like that. So you do that to children, you end up with fragmented personalities. You look at the classic Disney machine and the product that they output, you know, so you've got like your Miley Cyrus and whatever, you know, shattered personalities that end up developing strange elements, or what would normally be called mental illness, problems of mental illness.
And we see that play out through Disney, don't we, with the stories of all those Disney stars in the last 20 years, all the ones that
connected with that was what Jason posted. Mental health is a new inclusive way to portray yourself as a victim. And a lot of that is being portrayed in the general media by celebrities, you know, coming out about their problem, their illness or whatever, and then telling the younger kids that if they've got these problems, they've got superpowers.
It's a new church. It's like somebody saying, "Oh, I'm a Christian now. Oh, you'll get the protection of the church." Oh, I've got mental health. Oh, you'll get the protection of government now because you've signed up to them, basically.
Yeah.
Well, what's the
church?
What's the church's best weapon? It's fear.
Yeah.
They've used it throughout ever. You know,
fear of death, fear of loss.
Yep. So they keep doing it, and the fear side of it, the trauma, like I say, traumatizing the kids, and showing them images of bodies and blood and hearses and death.
One of the other elements of this as well, I think, is the kind of responsibility divestment or karmic redistribution, because this is giving the general populace the impression that it's already been talked about for a few years, probably quite a few years, that kind of victim culture. And I know we talked about it a few times recently, yeah? And I know I said this before a few episodes ago. What really worries me about the situation is the fact that under this popularity of victimhood, or this kind of cultural label that has been offered to people, if you can adopt some kind of identity that means you're an automatic victim, and that then gives you special privileges, even if it's just peer pressure privileges rather than actually direct stuff. But all of that is acting to cover up real victims and to diminish the damage that real victims have suffered. And this is why I say karmic redistribution and whatever. It's moving people's attention away from the actual culprits that carried out the process that caused the victimization in the first place. So that's the kind of element that's embedded in that Joker movie. Yeah, because they give the viewing public the target that you're supposed to put all the blame onto. And it's not really connected to reality. It's like the royal story, the Harry and Meghan story. They want the public to go, oh, it's because of those naughty journalists that are, just looking for salacious gossip and how terrible of them. Not the reality of the institutional embedded infrastructure, the network that enables people in power to do things like child trafficking, etc., 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 and the victims that are produced by those processes. Now everybody's a victim. Then the damage that was done to genuine victims becomes negated. It's meaningless.
Yeah.
It bothers me the way the very concept of victim culture is pushed and promoted. And it comes from a lot of people, it comes with this very cynical attitude of, oh, any fucker can be a victim now, and you're only doing it so you can get attention. Shit like that. And it's like, mate, go and talk to some survivors of various things, not just child abuse or whatever. There's lots of things you can look at where you can follow a chain of culpability that leads back to the status quo of the system and the people in power. But you go and chat to them and say, oh, you're just making it up. You're talking shit because you just want to be special and you want to be in the public eye and shit like that. It's, oh, man, that is sick. To me, that's just as sick as the people who actually carry out the stuff that results in victimhood in the first place.
Yeah, and what's the opposite to that? Selfhood.
Yeah.
So the opposite. And sort of move. I mean, that's the bit they don't sort of dwell on too much. They want to dwell on the negative, as we see all the time. Yeah. What's that, Gary?
This is Beta Ehrman Thunberg.
Oh,
she's young sister with the ADHD.
She's not the alpha, she's the beta.
Well, she's got ADHD, and she sees that as her superpower. Yeah, but I mean, how she can sing? I mean, she must be really simple songs, yeah. Otherwise, she'd forget the words, wouldn't she? Just sing the first verse over and over, yeah, that's her. I mean, she's making money out of the name.
I thought. Isn't it heavy metal stuff they do or something? I seem to remember.
Oh, no, I think it's soppy Europop. Yeah.
Oh, right. I thought Greta was supposed to be into singing heavy metal.
Greta might be. This is her sister. Yeah.
So,
the whole family.
Is the sister's the happy one who likes doing the happy pop songs. And Greta's the angry one that does the heavy metal.
She wants to be a pop singer so she can jet around the world. Oh
dear. It's like some tacky TV show she's on or something, or a really reject set from the Eurovision or something. I don't know.
yeah, or something like X Factor.
Interesting. The colour red, interesting, you know, wearing the...
And the blue, the red and the blue, and the purple curtain.
Yeah. So she's now going to be a pop star. Is that correct? Is that why we're... she's going to make it. She's going to be the next Kylie for climate. No.
Maybe she wants to be an opera singer like her mum.
Yeah, maybe, but she's on a pop song for Christmas. Or is it a Christmas book? Look, Moonbeam put it in the chat a little while back. It was a big one. So she sings a theme song from a book in Swedish called Handbook for Superheroes. That's his little sister. Yeah. So, yeah. Nauseating. Not to be watched after eating. Yeah.
Yeah, Handbook for Heroes.
So they're getting the whole family involved now, yeah?
Yeah, she's got those eyes.
They're like the Huxleys, you know?
Yeah. As an interesting note that I've been sort of trying to keep an eye on, but it's somewhat awkward for me because of the fact that I don't watch television per se. I get to have a look at a bit of television whenever I go and visit my relatives. But I noticed that in in a couple of shows, I think they're all BBC-based shows, which again is part of what making me say this is interesting. In the squeaky bungholes, you know, that one about all the brummy gangsters that wear flat caps. I don't want to name it because it would probably end up fucking pulling up keyword connections. But in that, they featured the character Oswald Mosley, and they did some deliberate misinformation and disinformation, misdirection of the public by presenting this idea that, you know, these Brummagem gangsters were somehow in cahoots, or they were used by Oswald Mosley as part of his political machinations. But now he's come up again as a character in another show that they're now showing, something about war, World on Fire, I think, something like that it's called. And it's yet another 1940s wartime show. You look at the history of the BBC, and I think we've had more wartime-based dramas in the last 10 years than we probably had in the history of the entire BBC. And wartime dramas, not documentaries and whatever, shows where it's about a dramatized situation about characters set during that time. Yeah? But there's just this thing at the moment that the BBC are pushing, you know, off the back of other particular recent public faces that got put in prison and then let out again and blah, blah, blah. You know, that Stephen Yaxley Lennon.
Oh, yeah.
And I've said for years that he's a replaying of the Oswald Mosley character in many ways, not completely, but in many ways he's a reiteration of that. And now BBC having that character woven into a few of their different shows. It's something they really, really want the public to be thinking about at the moment.
It's a big Brexit fake, isn't it? I mean, it's guaranteed to get everybody signing up to vote. Yeah, which is their consent, which is what they want, really.
Jingoism, patriotism.
Well, they just keep pulling out the Joker cards, don't they? You know.
That's a good one to point out as well, because it's similar to the deliberate misdirection about the concept of anarchy. You know, they associated the concept of the fool, the Joker, with that of chaotic destruction through things like the superhero character and stuff like that, yeah? So like you say, you know, they're pulling out the Joker card, but really in the symbology of what that archetype represents, it's the equivalent of saying blank slate, anything can happen. Because the Joker walks the line between chaos and order. Yeah, in the tarot deck, it's meant to represent the self, but in the symbology of the archetype, it represents that down the middle of the line, balance between chaos and order, and anything could happen. It could go one way, it could go the other. We just don't know. Yeah, it's like that open book kind of symbology.
Take that one step further, because you have the pieces of information that you think about in one way, and yet you feel about it with your emotions in another, and that creates a tension between the left and right hemisphere. Now, when that happens, Ouspensky said, a lot of the times that will produce humour. That'll make people laugh, yeah. But another thing he says is that's okay, yeah, but don't forget that every time you laugh, there's a chance you might be throwing away a little bit of understanding, because that tension can also lead to understanding. So then you think about the jokers that you used to have in Shakespeare. They were always the wisest people, because it was their way of life to put these things together that don't fit.
Yeah.
And the tension of them, they created wisdom for themselves. But when they tell ordinary people these things, everyone just laughs. They think it's a joke. Yeah. But don't forget, whenever people are laughing, there's an understanding there that is probably being missed. Yeah. And that's the real alchemy, the synthesis of the thesis and antithesis.
And it reveals the, I say it reveals, but it reveals the revelation of the truth within what the fool is saying or trying to present to the listener, because most often laughter comes from fear. Laughter is a reflection of fear. You are laughing partly because you're glad that you're not whatever the bad stuff that happened to the person in the joke, or you're not the fool who made the silly mistake or whatever. So laughter is an outlet of a revealing of your own fear in many ways. Yeah,
I'd say that's the lower kind of laughter that they have taught people. Yeah, the point and laugh at people, which is more like the collective dog snarling.
Yeah, it's projected fear.
Yeah, the truer Shakespearean humour is just, it's the friendly humour where you're trying to understand something and all of a sudden it just becomes too much. You can't put the pieces together, so you just laugh good-naturedly. But yeah, you're right. This Joker film is teaching people that as well. It's a genuine source of humour to just be absolutely fucking crazy. Yeah, which is not what humour is about at all, really. It's the nihilistic, like you say, the nihilistic throwing your fear away by going like berserk. I don't care what happens. Yeah. So they do more present the character in that kind of fashion of like, he considers his whole life and all his actions to be comedy. So he's very much on the archetype, which I suppose in a way I could say that then adds it into the superhero narrative, because even though he doesn't have any superpowers or whatever, his superpower is his craziness and his ability to just absolutely not give not one F is given, 0 Fs are given. He just sees it all as just being a comic tragedy or tragedy, in the classic kind of Greek sense.
I haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm sure I'll get to see it at some point.
I think I wouldn't necessarily recommend it.
I won't bother then.
It's slow, and unless you're if you're interested in the characters and stuff like that, then I think they've done it really well. They have woven it into the storyline really well, and he plays the character well. But it is a bit of a slow and depressing movie. It's very dark. Deliberate.
I used to find them Batman movies quite slow and dark anyway, the ones back in the day, and then I wasn't really that bothered about it. I watched it as a kid, the original Batman with the boom and the bat and the kapow and all that shit. Yeah, I remember that, but I haven't really followed all the other stuff. And you see so many splinters off the story. Like there's one called Gotham, which people, a few years ago probably, and others, and I just lose. Whatever.
I thought about adding it into my notes for tonight, but I thought, it's adding further to that one section that I didn't want to, but the other night they started up a new show called Batwoman. And because I'm into all this kind of stuff, well, yeah, I'll watch it, see what it's like, see what they're doing with it. I was sitting there thinking, oh man, this is dire. This should be called Bat Dyke, because that's literally what they've done with the whole concept. They've taken the concept of Batwoman, which is a cheesy franchise spin-off idea in the first place, but they've turned it into this propaganda arm of the fucking current narrative, and now you might as well just call it Bat Dyke. Now this girl is, an outright, completely out in the open dyke butch lesbian, and the shtick of the script writing is about her and her ex-lover that she wants to get back again, and her evil sister, and it's cheese, man.
Yeah,
it's cheese factor 10.
I'll give that one a miss then. Like all the other ones.
Again, I'd say, if you're into these if you're into superhero stuff, you'll probably like it and appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if you're into looking at how cultural media is used as a propaganda tool, you'll find it very interesting. Yeah. Same with Joker. I'd highly recommend it to anyone that fits those two kind of requirements. Yeah. If you're a superhero fan, you'll probably like it. And if you're into cultural media analysis, you'll find a lot in there.
Yeah. Well, you never know. I've watched the odd things. I mean, there's that many out there anyway. They seem to have increased the amount of these Marvel comic or hero type things over the last few years. It's just, I don't keep up with it all anyway much, but it's
hyper-normalization.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of it.
It's also was on my mind when I was putting my little notes together, and I was thinking, shall I remind people about that again? So here I am reminding people about that again. The documentary by Adam Curtis called Hypernormalization.
Yeah.
There's a lot of what we're seeing going on at the moment. They are literally saturating layer upon layer upon layer, so that this layer cake of propaganda weaving is getting so dense that for the majority of people, it's an exercise in craziness to try and find their way through it, to figure out what it's coming from, where it's emanating from.
Well, it just keeps everybody nicely, like, and en masse, maybe distracted when they're just totally into that kind of genre, like anything, like movie, sport, or whatever. You kind of get lost in, maybe too much.
And you know what it's like with the rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. And you've got to understand that. Yeah.
You have to take a little break from it, or a long break from it, every now and then, to recenter yourself, to ground yourself again. Because when you start digging around down in the rabbit hole, you will end up going round and round in circles, and you'll find stuff that will drive you batshit crazy because of the possible connections of it, or ramifications of it, etc., etc., etc. And after a while, it ends up in this big pile of stuff that you look at and you're just like, that's fucking insane. That's part of why they saturate and feed a lot of the crap into this environment, so that it potentially destabilizes people, and then they can go, oh, look at the crazy people ranting about aliens on the internet.
Yeah. Well, speaking truth, as they call it, the post-truth. Now it's like the post-truth era or whatever. I find that that's again, it's like I've heard that said a lot over the last few weeks, months or so, and it seems like that's the battle we're up against, isn't it? Whereas 10 years ago or more, it was a bit different, as it hadn't completely taken over. The internet was still, to a certain degree, free. Would you say it was free, or there was little bits of it still? But over the past, more than 10 years now, would it be 2019? So since 2006, 7, I'd say, maybe, going on from there, it just got more and more taken over by the Googles and the big corps, and the advertising, and that's what it was designed for, to get everybody advertised to in whatever shape, form or another. That meant listening to your conversations and doing all those things, and they've been doing them, like I say, especially since the smartphones being available. They've had, I'm sure in the other phones as well, they had microphones, so they've all had that you know, ability to
Echelon
and,
project.
yeah, and store that data afterwards without you even knowing about it. So
yeah, that was back before smartphone tech, when it was primarily just audio and maybe text if you had something that was capable of sending SMS. But that was at the time, that was the Echelon project that vacuumed up all that data. And they did record massive amounts of audio recordings of people's conversations. That's on record, you know, it's not denied, it's not conspiracy theory. So just to mention, Gary, Society of Spectacle put a link in the chat for that hypernormalization documentary. And hello, Uni Black Sister. And he asks, what's hypernormalization and what do the Marvel movies have to do with that? That's potentially a long answer, but I'll try and give a quick one. Hypernormalization is primarily referring to that documentary by Adam Curtis, and Gary's put a link there for you, that covers the concept of how for the past number of years, probably knocking on a decade since 9/11 really, they have been systematically increasing the levels of propaganda, but also the full spectrum influence of that propaganda. So it's not just coming to you through the newspapers or through the news on the television. It's soaked into, it's baked into all media, which is part of why they've been deliberately consolidating the various media studios, etc. Yeah. And what's that got to do with the Marvel superheroes? The superhero storylines and the movies that go along with them have been used as a vehicle to carry propaganda narratives deliberately. And what Adam Curtis is trying to show in his documentary is how that as we're getting more and more of these layers, these saturated layers of propaganda that are interwoven in their connections and storylines, people are being gradually and systematically normalized to concepts and ideas and information that normally they would find abhorrent or reject outright. You know? So when they start suggesting things like it'd be great if you could have a brain implant that allows you to connect to a robot so that you don't have to go to work, you can just sit there and, you know, shut your eyes and control the robot. It's hypernormalization. Right? So anyway, it's a good documentary. It's worth watching. It is a bit long, so I know some people find that off-putting because it's a lot to get through, but it's worth you checking out. I hope you see some of that propaganda for what it is.
And his other stuff as well is quite good. Some of the other stuff he's done.
Yeah, Power of Nightmares is, I think, probably the most important work he's done in terms of the kind of stuff we're often talking about. If you haven't seen it, you really need to dig it out and watch it. It is a BBC presentation, but that is part of the context that makes it highly relevant. Yeah. It may be a bit historical for a lot of people because it's referring primarily to the Russian-Afghanistan war and the creation of the Mujahideen and the use of them as a rebel force for one group of people, but as a terrorist force against other people. So it enabled propaganda that led to legislation changes and all kinds of shit. And it very well portrays the use of news media to present propaganda to the public. You watch that little documentary and he clearly shows you how a story can be manipulated, written outright, created from scratch outright, and yet it's presented as if it's factual news of what's happening in the world. And from that output, society is influenced in such a way that it changes the way we live.
Yeah, it skews everyone's thinking. Like I say, manipulating you and engineering your thinking and just giving you false information. Yeah.
I'll tell you something almost proof, that they've been doing this for a long, long time. When you talk to me about making up a news story like it's happened, but it didn't, one of the first things that occurred to me was the old BBC April Fools from about 1960. Yeah? I mean, that was one of the first examples of even the BBC coming out with something that's totally made up, like the spaghetti tree. Yeah?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
weird that that's one of the first thoughts that comes to my head when you talk about making up the news. I mean, shit, man, all you got to do is look at the front page, the tree. Yeah, today.
yeah.
But it's buried. Oh, no, we don't really do that, make things up. Oh, no. And, you know, they've already got that example from 40 years ago as a sort of road marker, just draw everybody's mind and eye back to the past when they really made up a whole story. It was about a spaghetti tree. It wasn't it funny? And you know, people in my generation, maybe that's the way the mind goes. Associations, yeah. You start with the first time that you ever heard that they might lie to you, and that's the first connection in a long chain of thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just did occur to me at that moment. You know, you're just talking about making up stories. Weird, yeah? That's how something that is buried in your memory can be triggered. Yeah? And it can also distract you from looking at what you should be looking at.
Let me just read this out. I could show it on screen, but it's split into 3 comments. But this is a quote that Canopy Space Lifeform Tony put into the chat for us from Adam Curtis. They believe that instead of trying to change the world outside, the new radicalism should try to change what was inside people's heads. And the way to do that was through self-expression, not collective action. But some of the left saw that something else was really going on. By detaching themselves and retreating into an ironic coolness, a whole generation was beginning to lose touch with the reality of power. That's from the hypernormalization, I think, as far as I remember. Yeah. So I think that's a good place to wrap it up there. It's about 10 to the hour, but I think we've said quite a bit on the subject.
Yeah, we have. And there's a lot of maybe go and watch some of those documentaries, guys. That'll keep you occupied for a bit, and it's good information.
The Century of the Self series that he did as well. That's quite a lot in that.
Yeah, that's another good one. Yeah.
If you combine that with other general reading, watching, and researching, then yeah, you'll get quite a lot out of it. Well, thanks for joining us in the chat. For all the people in the chat, James Owen, hello, mate. And Authentic Human Programming, hello. And I think I said hello to everyone. Luxem Tatro, hello. If I have missed you out, it's nothing personal. I'm just scrolling through, and this chat box doesn't keep the entire chat from the last 2 hours. So,
have you said hello to James? He's in.
I did, yes.
You did, okay.
Yeah, I thought it must be nearly the end of the show. I can see James in the chat room. Altered Edge Media, it's Jason, hello. And said hello to Super Leads. New Being, hello. Thanks for posting in the chat about the handbook for superheroes. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, I've not ranted about it now, really. Yeah, but just giving the. I know it's good to encourage people who have some kind of disability or problem, or however you want to describe it, to encourage them that they, can have a fulfilling life, even though they've got whatever it is, problem, X, Y, Z, whatever label they stick on it. But at the same time, I think it is not doing them any long-term help to convince them that their problem is somehow a superpower. I really can't see the logic in that, and I can't see how it's ethical, because you are basically giving them a delusion. That's what you're doing. You're telling them that it's okay to be deluded, and then you're feeding that delusion. That could get into all the stuff about gender politics and identity politics and all that shit that's been happening in the last few years,
I did notice something on that Greta video that we showed, I think last Wednesday. Yeah, I showed the little video of a conference or something. Yeah, in Europe it was, I think. And she appeared on the stage with all these other people. And then after her little speaking part, she went and sat down And I'm thinking, Swedish girl, and a little girl, and she's sitting next to this 6'2" Asian guy. Yeah. Obvious, like, Islamic bloke. Yeah. And one of the other speakers was a big girl from America, like obese. But I mean, that as well ties into getting the right wing to really hate on Greta. Yeah, having her sit next to one of these grooming Islamic blokes. Yeah, and he was a big bloke as well. Yeah, I mean that would have just set the Tommy Brigade on edge. Yeah, seeing that. So you know, the complete capitulation of the Swedish people, sort of thing.
To be woven into the UN agenda.
Yeah, and then it's supposed to be about climate, but they make sure they get an Islamic guy standing next to her so they can push multiple agendas at the same time. That was the point I wanted to make, like, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. We'll be back on Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel, and we'll dig a bit more into some of them articles, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
And Steve's on Thursday night, isn't he? Yeah, Thursday night. I still keep tripping over that, and I keep going to say Saturday, and he's like, no, it's Thursday night. Yeah. Check Steve Tagoose out on his channel on Thursday night for the mystery show, and we'll be back again soon. Take care, folks.
Yeah. Some good mathematics. Cheers, cookies.
Oh, good night.
I was going to say there was some good mathematics from Steve in his